Is it true people actually don't want to work anymore, or is that just some sort of modern day myth? Let's discuss this topic in more detail and try to understand what's actually beneath the surface. So, first of all, this isn't a new sentiment. In fact, as I was researching for this video, I found an image that was doing the rounds on social media a little while ago, showing evidence that this idea had been discussed in as early as 1894. But history aside, let's just quickly dive into whether this statement is true. So, do people actually not want to work? I personally think this is a false assumption. In reality, most people enjoy being productive in areas that are engaging to them and meaningful for them, and in areas that are aligned with their skills and values. And if anyone has experienced long stretches of unemployment, they'll most likely tell you that it can be quite hard on your own mental health to be unproductive for an extended period of time. So I don't believe people don't actually want to work. There are plenty of reasons why this idea of people not wanting to work has been circulating lately, and I think it's worth unpacking a lot of those factors. And a lot of it has actually lingered from COVID. And during that time, there was a host of reasons that converged and really impacted the mindset of a lot of people who were previously long term employed. Some of those factors were the ability to now work from home, which showed people the value of not having to go into an office, not having a long commute time, when they could not only be as productive as before from home, but they could also manage a lot of their home life duties in a much more efficient way. And secondly, there was an ability to reflect on the way we were living our lives at the time. For many people who were maybe employed for quite a period of time, maybe they'd been climbing the corporate career ladder, they could actually start to see that those things might not be the most fulfilling aspects of their life, and that maybe there were other things and other areas that they should focus their attention towards. Now, whether that was spending time with family or getting in touch with what they truly had a passion for, people seem to be reevaluating how much value they put on their actual careers. While these issues started to surface during this time of COVID, the reality is these issues had been there for a long time. They were just ignored for a range of reasons. One of the key ones being that things always seemed to work a certain way, so there was no expectation that it could work any other way. However, with COVID showing us a different way or an alternative mode of working and living, this changed our perspective. So, aside from the COVID specific factors that I just mentioned, there have been a couple of other ongoing challenges for employees that have really started to emerge more visibly these days. And the first one has to do with an increase in workload. Now, this often relates to what you see during, let's say, a recession or economic downturn. And what tends to happen is a company might have potentially been overstaffed, and that could have been a result of having a lot of work in their pipeline, or a huge growth trajectory, or a huge amount of investment funds that were really paying a lot of salaries. Now, that became affected as soon as revenue or other areas of work started to dry up. And we've seen a lot of this in the tech sector over the last couple of years, where healthy financial economies contributed to high employment levels. And once those economic circumstances changed, people had to get let go. And what happens is that when staff are reduced, the workload isn't. So it just gets shifted onto those who are still remaining within the organization. And this has a chain reaction effect. Essentially, those who still work at the company take on more and more work for the same rewards that they previously were, with maybe the same title. And this leads to burnout, which can even lead to things like post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very physiologically unhealthy for these employees. And that, of course, eventually results in poor performance and maybe voluntarily quitting a company just to retain some sense of sanity. And secondly, there's an issue around compensation. We've seen over the last year a lot of discussion about the high rate of inflation compared to the stagnating wage growth. And this is a problem because while money isn't the only motivating factor for people to work, it is one of the main contributing factors. Even if someone works in a job that they love, they're working on a passion project and they're using their natural gifts and skills, if they're not compensated fairly, that can start to build a level of resentment within that employee towards the company they're working for. And this can lead to someone becoming disillusioned with the idea of working in general. After all, what's the point of putting in so much effort if I'm not being fairly compensated for it? Now, there are a couple of other factors that I think are really critical. And the first one has to do with work environments, and particularly undesirable work environments. As I mentioned earlier, COVID really showed the world that employees can be productive from their own home as well, and not just productive, but actually thrive, as in many cases it's a much more preferable environment for employees to work from. And you probably remember that during the pandemic, many companies came out in praise of remote work, saying how this was the future. And yet, once the pandemic had subsided and people could return to the offices, these same companies did a complete 180-degree turn on their stance on remote work. This push for a return to the office really caused a lot of distress for many employees who, maybe for the first time in their working careers, started to see the value of a better work-life balance as a result of being able to work remotely. The main driving force behind this is the fact that many companies have long-term, very expensive office leases that cannot easily be broken. So of course there's a financial incentive for management to make sure that employees return to an office, even if it's actually detrimental to productivity. And as a side note, there are some very nice offices to work in, but there are some truly oppressively designed work environments that we've probably all seen before, and working in these types of offices can really degrade an employee's mentality over time. So it's no wonder many people didn't want to go back to those call center-like spaces. But this last factor may be the most important one, and that has to do with toxic management. Now, this is a huge topic, and I intend to go over this in more detail in upcoming videos. But for the moment, let's take a look at some of the factors and problems that come from poor toxic management. So yes, there are issues like micromanagement or negative reinforcement and even bully tactics that get branded about by poor managers. And one key issue I want to focus on is what I'll call the line of visibility between management and employees. And this essentially refers to the fact that managers and employees don't see what the other is going through in depth, which leads to this concept of out of sight, out of mind. For a manager, they may have absolutely no idea what kind of personal issues are going on in their employees' lives, or the way their managerial styles are impacting their relationships with their employees. And this isn't an excuse for bad behavior, but it's to help us understand why some of these things may occur. And the result of these issues is that employees feel dehumanized and again can feel resentment towards managers for this perceived poor treatment. If you go looking through websites like Glassdoor or browsing discussions on Reddit, you'll find that toxic management behaviors can be one of the biggest reasons people choose to leave companies, which ultimately feeds into this idea of people not wanting to work. But I would suggest maybe a better title is People Don't Want to Work for Bad Managers. So just to reiterate what I mentioned up front, people do want to be productive, but they want to be productive in the right context. And that context has to have the right conditions for them to flourish. I think you can boil these down to a few key conditions, such as a nurturing environment, fair compensation, and the right balance of challenge within the work. Now, this is critical for any manager anywhere. The role of management should be around fostering a healthy work culture in order to get the best out of the employees. And in doing so, you'll find that it's actually best for your business because happier employees mean better productivity, which also means fewer rounds of turnover, and turnover is costly, so it's helping your bottom line. Okay, that's it for today. If you enjoy this video, please like my Excel spreadsheets. I worked on them for way too long. Share your boss's lunch with your colleagues in an act of defiance. And subscribe to a laundry service because you won't have time to do laundry while working that corporate grind. And if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, follow this channel where we'll talk more about topics such as business, creativity, and innovation. See you next time.